I don't know if you know this or not, but I am a time traveler, and I've traveled back in time to July 5th, and I've made you all time travelers with me. So we're all going back to July 5th. I wasn't able to be here July 5th to preach this sermon. I'm here today, so I'm going to go ahead and give it that I had originally written it and presented it. It isn't 4th of July weekend anymore, but I don't care. We're gonna talk about freedom, but we're not gonna talk about the kind of freedom that you think of, your national freedom, your freedom that comes from this country. We're gonna talk about the freedom that we have through Christ, the freedom that we have because of our Savior, because of His sacrifice, because of His life and His death, His burial, and His resurrection. We have a freedom that's different. And I think that sometimes we get our freedoms mixed up. I think we get our freedom for this country mixed up with our freedom with Christ. I think we don't see that, we see them the same, or we compare them to each other, and they're two different things. And so this morning, whether you are a follower, a believer of Christ, and you're watching or you're here, or whether you're someone that's wondering or who has known God before in your life, and you're just kind of wondering, or if you just happen to come online there and catch us and say, what's this guy talking about? I don't even know who this God is that you're speaking of. This is for you. This is for everyone. We need to understand what our freedom is, what our freedom in Christ truly is, and stop comparing it to our freedom as citizens of the United States. See, our citizenship here in the United States is way different than what our citizenship is going to be in heaven. They're two different things, and we can't compare them and put them together. So I have three things that I want to talk about when we talk about our freedom and what that looks like and what our freedom really is in Christ. And you know, a couple Wednesday nights ago, I was talking with David Love, and we were discussing some things, and I mentioned to him that when I was 20 years old, actually when I was 18, when I first went into the military, because I went into the military when I was very young, my idea of freedom is way different than what my idea of freedom is today. When I was a young kid, the Iraq War had started. It was in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, and I can remember laying in bed and my family, my dad actually coming in and waking me up in the middle of the night and said, we're going to war with Iraq. And from that time all the way until I went to the military, you know, I kept scrapbooks of the wars that were happening, and I really wanted to be a soldier because I wanted to protect the freedom of the country. But that kind of freedom came with us going and invading and killing and all kinds of other things that provide the freedoms we have. But with Christ, that freedom is different. And now that I'm almost 40, very, very soon going to be 40 years old, my idea of freedom that I had when I was 20 is completely different today. My idea of freedom today, back then, was go, kill, protect. I'm serious. That's what it was. That's what it took to be free. That's what I thought to be free. And as a 40-year-old standing here, I'll tell you what it takes to be free is love. That's what it really takes. That's what Christ's freedom really is the freedom to love who you want, when you want, where you want, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, no matter what they've done in their life. You are free to love everyone. And that's the bottom line basis. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. And so I just want to go back to those scriptures, 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 16 through 21, and you could follow along on your notes. The notes may be a little bit different. My notes got thrown away. So I don't know what happened. They just kind of got tossed in the trash. And I think it may have been because they still said July 5th on it. So it was probably a good indicator of why they went in the garbage. So I reprinted them out real quick. So they may not be exactly the same, but we'll try to stick to it, okay? So just go with me. All right, so 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 16 through 21. It says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. Now, listen to that. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to the governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. If you don't learn anything today, if you don't even learn anything about freedom, highlight that right there. Just highlight it out. For it is God's work that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk. So if people are talking ignorant, just do good. That's how you're going to silence them. And then it goes on to say, live as free people. We're being told, live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show the proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God, honor the emperor. Slaves, in your reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his footsteps. Anytime I see that this is an example, I pay real close attention. Because it's being said, this is an example for you to live by. So when it comes to our freedom, as citizens of heaven, because I think that's what we need to start focusing on more, because I think being a citizen of heaven is kind of a higher calling than to be a citizen of the United States. If you can live as a citizen of heaven, you can definitely live as a citizen in the United States. But we got to learn to live as citizens of heaven. And we have to understand what that freedom is, where that freedom comes from. It doesn't mean we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. And so there's three things I want you to consider our freedom from three different perspectives. Okay, and the first one is that it is a controlled freedom. Now that doesn't sound like that goes together, does it? Controlled freedom. Well, it's controlled because we have the ability to control that freedom. We have a choice. We get to choose. Well, in this nation, you have a controlled freedom, right? Like you get a choice. You got two choices. You got wrong or right. You're free up to the point that you endanger someone else, or that you put somebody else's life at risk or livelihood at risk, and then there's consequences to that. So our freedom as citizens of heaven is a controlled freedom. Letter A says, act as free men, but do not use your freedom as covering, excuse for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. That's just to say, don't use the freedom that you have to do evil to other people. Like you've been given it. You've been given this freedom. Why would you use it to do bad to others? Why would you use it to use evil for others? You have to that freedom has to be controlled. You have to use it for good. You have to use it for good. Freedom is not a license. You know what licenses are? License means you have the right, you can just do it. If you have a license, you can go drive a car. But freedom's not like that. It's not a license. It shouldn't be used as a license. It doesn't mean just because you're free, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. Just because you've been saved, just because you've called on Christ, that you've been baptized, that you are now a believer, a member of the body, does not mean that it's just permanent. You can go on doing whatever that you want to do. Your freedom is controlled. Your freedom in heaven will be controlled as well, but it's controlled in such a way that you make the choice to give that control over, to give that control up, to give yourself over. We substitute licenses for freedom to the endangerment of the salvation of our souls. So if we sacrifice that, if we substitute license, if we say, okay, it's not freedom, it's license, then we're endangering others. Bill says something that your freedom ends, if you're going to punch me, your freedom ends an inch before my nose. And that's to say that we're free, but we can't impose upon others. We can't endanger others. And that's not the kind of freedom that we have. We have a freedom to love, which means we don't do that. That's what's different about our freedom in the United States to our freedom and our citizenship in heaven. Letter B, controlled freedom is that which, with regard to sin, in its various forms declares these things. All right, so I have three things on your notes, I think. So a controlled freedom with regard to sin in various forms claims these things. Okay, it claims one, that's not for me. If you're controlled freedom in regard to sin, you're going to say, that's not for me. I'm not going to do that. I'm free, but I'm going to make the choice not to do that. Number two is I want no part of that. Now, when you're writing these things out, hold these inside. This is what you need to say when you see sin happening, when you see that you realize I'm free and I have a choice to make, and I can go this way or I can go that way. And what we're supposed to do as citizens of heaven, we're supposed to say, nope, that's not for me. I don't want any part of that. I don't want to be a part of that. Others may, but I may not. Now, there's not a letter 4. I wrote down a letter 4 because I'd rather eat a chicken than indulge in that sin. And you can write down anything, a live chicken, rather. You can write that. You can write something down below there if you want. What would you rather do than to indulge in sin? Would you rather eat a live chicken than to indulge in sin? What would you rather do? That's controlled freedom. That means I have the right. I can say I have the right, or I have the ability, rather, to do whatever I want to do. Not that won't come without consequences, but in order to have that kind of freedom that we have through Christ has to be controlled. And we have to make the right choices. And we have to stay away from sin. By control freedom, I mean the ability and desire to renounce sin. That's the freedom. Your controlled freedom is the ability to say, I'm not going to sin anymore. That's it, I'm done. And I think with me, that's the difference from when I was 20 to where I'm 40, is that I have the ability now to say, nope, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's the freedom that I have. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to do I'm not going to indulge in that sin, no matter how pleasurable that sin could be. It's to say no to the tempter when he entices us to our own desires. That's a controlled freedom. To say, nope, I hear it, but I'm not going to do it. We all fall prey to that. We all fall into that, where we hear the tempter and we're tempted, and we sin because of it. But a controlled freedom in heaven, a controlled freedom as a citizen of heaven, is going to say, you're going to say no. Say, nope, I don't hear it. I know what God has in store for me. I will not fall prey to my own sin, to my own desires. You see, in this world, and I think you guys know this already, and Neil had a song he was going to sing me, because I was telling him I was inspired by a song for this sermon, and he goes, was it this song? And then he went back and he told me, I can't remember who it was now, I think it's Rod Stewart maybe. Bob, there you go. Of course, it was Bob Dylan for Neil. But it was a song about you're going to serve somebody, right? Isn't that what it is? That's the name of the song. You're going to serve somebody. And you are. On this earth, you're going to serve somebody or something. It's going to happen. And it's real simple. It goes like, okay, I'm a guy that, like Neil says, I do a lot of things. I'm bored really, really easy. We're going to get along. You got a lot of energy. I do too. I like to have my hands in all kinds of stuff. But what happens is, like, I'll be working on one thing and totally focused to it, and then something else will come along and move on to that and be totally focused on that for a long period of time. And what happens is I'm just moving from master to master. And if I didn't have God, if I didn't say I'm doing this for God, if I didn't say I'm working for God to do this, that I'm God's servant, and that's why I'm doing these things, then I would just be serving those items. They would become my masters. And at the end of the day, if I didn't have anything, there's a good possibility I could be self-serving. You can do that too. You can serve yourself before serving God. And all that we do in order to maintain this freedom that we have, to maintain this controlled freedom, to have this citizenship of heaven, we have to remain slaves and let God be our master. We have to give it up to Him. And that's part of that controlled freedom. We're giving it to Him. We're in control by saying, look, I'm giving my life to you. Do with it what you will. And what comes with that, the reward that comes with that, and I'll tell you from my experience, is a lack of worry. I don't worry as much as I used to, because God's got it under control. I still worry. We're trying to work on saying concerned, right? I'm concerned about this, but the truth is I do still worry sometimes. But worry is from the devil. The worry is not freedom. The worry is it's a prison. Neil will tell you that worry is like sitting in a rocking chair and rocking, and you ain't going anywhere. You're just rocking back and forth, and that's all worry is doing. But worry is a prison that you can be put into, and we need to be free from that. To say yes when the Holy Spirit urges us to obedience or service of others, that's real freedom. When we listen to the Spirit, when we go to the service of others, or we do what we're supposed to be doing, we're in true freedom. To limit your rights for the good of others, your freedom of speech does not include slander or perjury, right? You know that, right? You have freedom in the United States, but you can't perjure and you can't slander. What's something else you might not be able to do inside a building like this? You can't say a certain word, right? I'm not going to say it because it's against the law. But that's the limit of our rights. And so we do have limits in our rights as a nation, but we have limits as our rights to God, but at the same time, we have consequences. And the truth is, I was thinking about this today, I would rather be a servant and have God as my master here on this planet than to serve myself or serve someone else and end up serving Satan in hell. Because at the end of the day, that's the truth of the matter. The truth is you can serve God right here, right now, go to heaven, serve God when you get there, and it's going to be amazing. Or you can serve yourself and you can serve the flesh and you can serve the world, and then you'll serve Satan in hell. I know that's a harsh thing to say, but it's a reality of a truth. And that's something that keeps me going, okay, I'm going to keep serving God, because I don't, as much fun as I could have right here, I'd rather, spend this 80, maybe hopefully 80 years and suffer and go and have a wonderful life in heaven, or a wonderful, eternity in heaven, rather than eternity in hell. All right, so letter C, we are free to choose our master and our actions, and that's the freedom in it. We have the right. We get to do it. That's free will. We get to choose who our master is going to be. We get to choose what our actions are going to be. That's a controlled freedom. Even though we get to choose, we get a couple of choices. You got two, basically. You can serve God or you can serve Satan. It's the only two places we get to go. But we have a choice. And Paul wrote in Romans chapter 6, verses 15 through 18, he says this, "What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? By no means." Basically saying, because now we're not under the law anymore, we're under grace, should we just keep on sinning? We're free. And we're free because of Christ. Should we just keep on doing the same thing we were doing before because we're now free? I mean, a prisoner doesn't go home and do the same things he was doing in prison at home. He shouldn't, because he's been set free. Prisoners act differently when they're set free than they do when they're in prison. So we've been set free. So don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey? Whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. So your slave to sin is going to lead to death, and your obedience is going to lead to righteousness. But thanks be to God that through you, that though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You have been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness. So you got a choice. Sin is going to lead to death, and obedience is going to lead to righteousness. And you've been set free from sin and now get to be a slave to righteousness. But it's a choice. It's a controlled freedom. You make that decision of what you're going to do. It's a controlled freedom, and then number two, it's also a conditional freedom. Your citizenship in heaven is conditional. It's not guaranteed, right? Not guaranteed. It's conditional. There's things that we have to do, not works, so to speak. We have to do these works and get in. There's things that we have to do, though. Letter A, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again to the yoke of slavery. Listen to that. It was for freedom that Christ set us free. It was for the purpose of being free, of freedom to love one another, freedom to do for one another, freedom to bring Christ to the world. That's what we were given freedom for. And in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 through 5, it says this. It says, "Behold, I, Paul, say to you that if you receive circumcision, Christ will be of no benefit to you. And I testify again to every man who receives circumcision that he is under no obligation to keep the whole law. You have been severed from Christ. You who are seeking to be justified by the law, you have fallen from grace. For we, through the Spirit of faith, are waiting for the hope of righteousness." See, our freedom is conditioned upon the work of Christ, not upon the condition of our own work. Not our own efforts. It's not how good you were, or how many meals you served in the line at the soup kitchen. It's not how many mission trips that you've been on. It's none of that. We can't be saved by those things. We were saved by Christ. We were saved because of the work that He did, not by any work that we could ever do. It's conditioned upon standing firm. It says, stand firm. Do not be moved away from your faith, hope, and confidence in Christ. It's conditioned upon standing firm. You've got to stand firm in your faith. And it's conditioned upon the faithfulness to Jesus Christ. Your faithfulness. So we're supposed to stand firm when we're met with temptation. We're supposed to stand firm when we're met with suffering. We're supposed to stand firm. Well, what's that firmness we're standing in? It's love. We stand firm and love against these things. Letter B says, Jesus paid for and freely offers freedom to those who meet the condition of making Him Lord of life. It's a mouthful. And I think I gave you blanks just to fill in to make it easy. I don't know if they put it up there yet. It's letter B. Jesus paid for and freely offers freedom to those who meet the condition of making Him Lord of life. In Hebrews chapter 5, verses 8 through 9, it says this, "Although He was a son, He learned obedience from the things which He suffered. And having been made perfect, He became to all those who obey Him the source of eternal salvation." And in 2 John chapter 1, verse 6, it says this, "And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love." You know, I really, truly believe that the freedom that we enjoy as citizens of heaven, as the freedom that we enjoy through Christ, is a freedom to love. Bottom line. That's what that freedom's about. That means you can't tell me who I can love. That means you can't tell me who I can be friends with. You can't tell me where I can go and where I can. That's the freedom. That's why Jesus went through Samaria. That's why Jesus talked to the Samaritan woman at the well. He wanted them to know that love is true freedom. That you can cross every one of those boundaries and go anywhere you want to go when you go in love. That you can be free. And only through love will you truly be free. And in letter C it says, "There is not a work we can perform that meets the qualifications for salvation. But we must have faith, and faith is belief that trusts and obeys." So if it's not, there you go. There is not a work that we can perform that meets the qualification of salvation, but we must have faith, belief that trusts and obeys. Upon the condition that Christ remains your Lord and you stand firm in your faith and obedience, you're free. That's that idea. Upon the condition that Christ remains your Lord, Christ is your Lord, and you stand firm in your faith and your obedience to him, you are free. So you can think that's exactly what freedom is. My freedom is based upon my obedience. My freedom is based upon my faith in God. And as long as I stand firm in my belief, as long as I keep Jesus as the Lord of my life and Jesus as the Lord of my family and the Lord of all, I'm going to be free. And I give you an easy example. I've given this example before, and you may or may not remember it, but it's real simple. You know, when I was first struggling to actually, it came down to tithing for me, which was kind of my last thing to kind of give up. And it was kind of a difficult thing for me because I was worried because I've always been broke my whole life. And so giving up a little bit of extra money, even though it was going to God, I didn't really know what was, it kind of scared me a little bit. And having lots of discussions and hearing a lot of wiser men than myself, they said, "You know what, Tim, just try it." Scripture says that too, doesn't it? Just try it. Just give it a shot. What happens? Well, I started giving regularly, and I still was pretty broke, and we're trying to live on 80% of our income, still pretty broke. And I was driving home in my car, and the alternator went out. It's about $400 alternator. Didn't have the money to pay it, but because I had been saving a little bit, as much as I had been giving in, 10% to the church, 10% to my savings account. Well, guess what? I had money in my savings account to pay for it. And so I was able to get a new alternator. But not only that, at that moment I went, I understand. I get it. It clicked at that moment. And it was a day later, I think, we opened up the mailbox and there was a check in there for $500. There was a refund that we didn't know. It took care of that alternator, put the money back in the savings account. I tried him and it worked. And it worked. And it worked. But it's got to be, you have to have that faith. You got to stand firm in that faith. And it comes and it comes and it comes in the more. But now I don't worry about it. I don't worry about that anymore. If something breaks and I don't have enough money, I'll say, we'll just wait. It'll be okay. Just pray and wait. We'll take care of it. And that's worked every time. It's happened. It's happened. So it's a controlled freedom. It's a conditional freedom. And it's also a constructive freedom. It's a constructive freedom. In 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 16, it says, "Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves." It's a freedom that results in purity, not in perversion. It's a freedom that produces wise living, not wicked living. It's a freedom from earning salvation. We don't have to earn it anymore. It's a freedom that enables us not to do just as we want, but as we ought to do. It's a freedom we don't do what we want to do, but what we should be doing. It's a freedom from sin's power and from sin's penalty. It's a freedom from fear, and it's a freedom from death. I don't fear, I think there was a time, and it's weird, I think, I know I definitely was having some sort of midlife something in like late 30s, because I did have a little bit of fear that I was like, man, that's almost halfway over. I only got about half my life to live. Well, I got so much stuff to do. And then a couple of years, I'm like, I'm not as worried about it anymore. I'm just not as concerned with it anymore. And I think that, and I say I think, but I'm pretty sure I know The reason I'm not as concerned about dying or concerned about, my money in the bank account is because God's got me. He's got me all day long. I've been here 6 years, going on 6 years. I've been preaching for 2, full time here. And over that period of time, I didn't know what, some days I didn't know. I didn't know what was, Neil, get with you. I had no idea what was going to happen. So much stuff. You think that you become a Christian, everything just gets better. You start working for the church and everything just gets better. You just got this perfect life. Stop if you think that you're just watching Joel Osteen. Okay? I'm telling you, that's what happens. You watch that and you think everything's good. Yeah, and I did that myself. Oh man, it's all good. That prosperity. Yeah, everything's good. No, it was awful. It was terrible. God did not, hey, I'm hard-headed, so God didn't have to, he didn't do this like gentle, like, here, let me rush you along, let me push you along. He had a big stick and he hit me several times a day. Every day, and still hits me every day, at least once. Neil says if you're not running into the devil, you're walking with him, right? So I'm always running into him, and God's always hitting me over the head, telling me I did something wrong. But I probably did. But it's a process, and it's learning, and it's faith. And now I understand that my faith is strong enough that I don't have to worry about those things. And it's growing to where I'm not going to have to worry about many things, but it's definitely getting there. And so that it's an absolute truth that you don't have to, you can be free of that fear and that dread. And it's also a freedom from death. It's also a freedom to become all that God intends you to be. You're free to be what God made you to be. For me, that's a kind of a freeing thing. God made me to be what I am. I'm free to be that. I like that. Letter A says, those who have found that kind of freedom in Jesus are being formed into his likeness. And I think that's where it changes for all of us. I think when we truly find that freedom we have as citizens of heaven, when we truly find that freedom that Christ died for, that he gave to us, when we find it, we start to be transformed more into him. And I say that because I truly believe that freedom is love. And I'm going to keep saying that's the bottom line. And when you are transformed into the likeness of Christ, all you should be transformed into is the likeness of love. And that's the idea. Freedom is all about loving. Paul wrote this in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 17 through 18. He wrote, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit. So when we find that freedom, when you discover that freedom, you're going to begin to be transformed into his image. And here's the thing, is that you could have been baptized, you could have been baptized when you're 12. You could have believed with all your heart when you were 12 years old, and still not being able to enjoy the freedom that Christ has given you. And the reason why is because we're not being obedient. The reason why is because we're not being faithful. So we're not enjoying that kind of freedom. We're not enjoying it at all. So today we can look back at that and we can have that opportunity. We can think, what does it really mean to be free? And going through these scriptures, you can see what it truly means to be free, to be a free person. It's always going to be to serve the Lord. It's always going to be to serve Christ. It's going to be to serve God. That's where our freedom is always going to lie. In 2 Corinthians chapter, I read that one. Letter B, do not be misled by those whose so-called freedom leads to depravity and slavery. So think about that. I think that, other than love, freedom tends to be one of those words that's always thrown out there. I want to be free. We should be free. I should be able to be free to do whatever it is that I want to do, right? Right now, that's actually a big topic, as a matter of fact. And I'm not going to get into it because there's way too much controversy, so I'm just going to stay away from it, but I'm going to tell you there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it. I'm free. I should be able to do what I want to do. On every side. There's like 100 sides. And every single one of them are shouting about their freedom. Your freedom isn't based upon your needs. That's not why you're free. That's not why Christ set us free. He didn't set us free so that we could enjoy that freedom. He set us free so that we could do his work so others could enjoy that freedom. That's it. He set us free so that we could freely move about and help others become citizens of heaven like us. That's where our freedom lies. Our freedom lies not in our opinions. It doesn't lie in our politics. Our freedom doesn't lie in our possessions. It lies in Christ. It lies in love. It lies in our ability to come up to Jared and say, Jared, do you know who my Savior is? Do you know why I believe what I believe? That's the freedom that you have. You have the freedom to take Christ's message to the world. That's our freedom. And we have to be really careful about listening to others and their so-called freedoms. Because sometimes those freedoms will lead you into bad places. And there's freedoms, I'll be honest, freedoms in the United States that we can do freely that will lead you to a bad place. That can lead you into sin. There's laws on the books. There's rights and there's stuff that we do here that could make us sinful people. And people will want to lead you down that path. But you got to get this in your head. If you don't get anything else into your head, you've got to start thinking every single day that I am not just a citizen of the U.S., which is great. I swore an oath. I defended it. I love living here. But you are a citizen of heaven before anything else. Before anything else that you do. And you put that in your brain and you keep that in your heart and you live that every single day, and you're going to see differences. You're going to see that the way that you live is different. People are going to see the way that you live is different, and you're going to start affecting all the people around you. Because, like I said before, being a citizen of heaven is a way higher calling than to just be a citizen here in the United States. So when we celebrate freedom like we did on the 4th of July, which was awesome, what was funny about that is they shut down all the big fireworks, right? But there were still lots of fireworks. I was driving home from some fireworks that we did with the kids down 56, and you looked out and everywhere there was fireworks, everywhere you went. And my youngest daughter, who is quite smart, said, Dad, why, if we're so concerned about the planet, why do we keep making all this smoke with fireworks? She did. She's smart. She says she asks a lot of smart questions sometimes. But so our freedom here, it's great that we celebrate it, but you know what? We should be celebrating every Sunday morning, not just Sunday, but we should every Sunday, but every single day, we should wake up celebrating the fact that we live in a free place. Not a free country, but a free citizen of heaven. That's what we should celebrate when we wake up in the morning. I'm free today. I'm not free because my country gave me freedom. I'm free because Christ died, because he lived, he taught, he died, and because of his blood, I get to be free. That's what we wake up for in the morning. That's what we do every single day. You got to forget about it. I get it. We've got to be patriots. I get it. I'm a patriot. And the reason I feel comfortable saying this is because I am a patriot. So I do feel comfortable saying heaven is a much higher calling. I feel that my lies in heaven before it lies with this country. Where they always say God. It used to be God, country, family, but I'm God, family, country. Because my family is not just the people at home watching. They're all sitting in this room with me. They're all, if I'm a child of God, then my family is every person God has ever made. So that's always going to come before my country. So here's the thing. If you want to be free, and now I had this song already because Orlando was going to sing it for me, and I didn't want to put it on Jared because I didn't know if he had it, but I don't know if he knows this one, it's okay. But you can go home, put it on your car on the way home. You got YouTube and Pandora. You can find it, so don't act like you can't. You could probably just, you could just say it to your car and it'll play it for you, right, Neil? You can just say, play this song and it'll play it for you. Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. If you're going to be free, you got to tell Christ, you got to tell God, have your own way with me. That's how we're going to be free. I don't have to worry about things like I told you about the story about the alternator. I stop worrying about those things. I don't talk about money to nobody because I don't worry about it. It's not something I'm concerned with. Because at the end of the day, if you take everything that I have, if you take every piece of clothing, you take every electronic, you take every physical possession that I own, I'm still going to heaven. If I'm homeless on the street, I'm sitting out on the street and I got barely enough to eat, guess what? I'm still going to heaven. I'm still free. I think honestly, the older that I've gotten and the more possessions that I have, I'm probably more of a slave to the things I own than they are to me. I feel like a lot of times my stuff owns me. Like a person, you buy a boat. If you own a boat in here, I'm sorry. But the truth is a lot of times that boat owns you. You don't own that boat. You spend a lot of time on that boat, fixing that boat, dedicating your time to it. I want to be free. And I want to be a citizen of heaven, and I want to live that way, and I want you to be able to live that way too. So going forward, keep it in mind, ingrain it, and plant it in your head. I am a citizen of heaven. Stop, say, oh, where are you from? I'm from heaven. That's where I came from. I don't know what you're talking about. Say it. Somebody say, where are you from? From heaven. I'm going back there someday. That's all you got to tell them. It's easy. Just keep it in your head. If we were to think in our minds, in our hearts every single day, I'm a citizen of heaven, that's the way we start to live. And that's the way we need to start living. I'm telling myself that too, guys. I'm not just saying it to you. It's something I say to myself regularly because I want to be a citizen of heaven and I want to live that way. So in closing this morning, I want to thank everybody for coming. I know things have been tough, and it was kind of weird. I said it's been a while since I've been up in front of people speaking, and I was talking to a minister friend of mine named James, and he told me, I said, I'm a little nervous. He said it's like riding a bike. I didn't tell him I don't know how to ride a bike. I do know how to ride a bike, actually. Tim said I could take the training wheels off next week, so it'll be good. It'll be all right. But I'm just so glad that we're able to come back together, and I'm so glad that I was able to see everybody's faces, and I'm so glad we're able to worship together. Even if you're at home and you're worshiping, I don't know where you're at, but if you're at home and you're worshiping at home, you're still worshiping with us. You're still here with us. You could still see some of us, some of the backs of heads, but you see some of our faces. But we're all here together. And no matter what this world takes from you, whether it's your ability to come here to church, or whether it's your job, or whether it's, a loved one, a family member, whatever it is, no matter what the world takes, remember that you are free. That you are free because of God. You have salvation because of Him. And no matter what anybody takes from you, no matter what the world takes from you, they can't take your salvation. You have to give that up freely. You have to give that up. So hold on to it. Stand firm in what you believe. Be free, and be free citizens of heaven as you leave today, as we stand and sing.